phones are raised and some are put to the ear. This would tell us exactly where the cardinals believed this church should go. As I said, not just theologically, but geographically in terms of age and in terms of addressing many of the social and financial issues that have in some ways divided this church and this College of Cardinals.
I think those are all on the minds of the cardinals for sure, those practical matters of administration and reorganizing the Roman Curia, handling Vatican finances. But I think what you said is true about the international scope. This was the most international conclave. And so, per force, they had to address issues not just that concern us in the West, but issues in Latin America, very distinct. In Africa, for example, where the church is burgeoning but also under persecution. In Asia, where the interreligious conversation is so important. I think they had to deal with all of that. And again, it's very interesting that with all that complexity, they came to a consensus pretty quickly.
So John is the most frequently chosen papal name, followed by Gregory, Benedict, Clement, Leo, Innocent. Francis was Francis the First. Susan, when this Pope says to the assembled cardinals what his new name is going to be, and it will be announced, what will it tell us?
I think it'll tell us something about a former pope or a missionary who was important to the country where he came from, or someone with whom he feels like he has a deep spiritual connection, someone who he would hope to emulate in the way that he carries out the papacy, maybe someone who he admires for the priorities that Pope had and that he would like to imitate because he thinks that's what's best for the church and the world today. So I think it's the first indication we have of a person whose life and whose work has been deeply meaningful to the person who's been elected Pope.
Father John Bartunek joins us as well. And Father, the Pope immediately becomes Pope. He acquires the full supreme authority over the church, but there are some details that need to be worked out first. He's going to choose, and I think Bishop Barron alluded to this, whether he's going to have a small, medium, or large set of clothing. This is where I believe he also receives his fisherman's ring. There are things that have to happen inside still the Room of Tears, named, by the way, because it is known that some of the people who were elected went in there and broke down in tears either from emotion or some who are wondering if they are worthy to take on what is happening. But what is your reaction to what you're seeing and hearing from those folks who are assembled on St. Peter's Square? Father Bartunek? We seem to have lost him. So, Claudio, let me go back to you because we are seeing people, as you mentioned before, waving flags, cheering, but we saw some people who looked very emotional as well. What are you able to spot in the crowds?
No, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I was saying before that everybody is rooting for a pope that comes from their country, but as a matter of fact, anybody who's going to show up on that balcony in an hour or so, even less, is going to be everyone's pope, so everyone is expected to applaud and cheer for him. Let me just give you a couple of stats on when we expect to see the pope appear on the balcony. In the last conclave in 2013, the Cardinal Senior Deacon, who's the one that announces the Habemus Papam and then announces the name by which the Pope wants to be called. He appeared, the Senior Cardinal Deacon appeared 66 minutes after the white smoke, and then Pope Francis appeared 10 minutes after that, so about 76 minutes. In 2005, the Senior Cardinal Deacon appeared on balcony to announce the name 54 minutes after white smoke, and then Pope Benedict XVI appeared 5 minutes after that. So I will say that if that trend continues, that we will see the Senior Cardinal deacon appear on the balcony to say the Habemus Papam, to tell us what name the Pope decided to go by, and then shortly after that we will see the new Pope coming. But what I see now, it's very moving, to be honest, Chris. I mean, this is my third conclave, and it always gets to me. It's a lot of people screaming, shouting, applauding, moved to tears, because they know that they are part of a historic moment. They know that this is one of a lifetime opportunity for most of them, because a lot of people around here are not Italian. A lot of people are from all over the world, and those flags they were waving, it proves it. One of the reasons is that this is the Jubilee year. That means that it happens every 25 years, and that means that a lot of people, a lot of pilgrims from around the world would have been here anyway, or many will have arranged this trip after Pope Francis died. So this is truly an international crowd, and everybody are united in this historic moment while waiting who the next Pope will be. We'll know that within the hour, Chris.
We will indeed, and in the meantime, as we mentioned, the Gammarelli firm, tailors to the ecclesiastical establishment of Rome, have arranged what could be some quick alterations depending on who the Pope is. And the newly vested Pope then goes back into the Sistine Chapel, where his cardinal electors are waiting for him, certainly to congratulate him, but also to give a prayer of thanksgiving. This is, again, when the Pope will receive his fisherman's ring. In 2013, and he's Pope now, so he can do what he wants to do, but Pope Francis stopped at the Pauline Chapel on his way to the loggia for a moment of silence and prayer. Bishop, he clearly wanted to take a breath. He wanted to consider what he was facing. And I go back to when I was there for Pope Francis's funeral, and one of the women I was speaking to who got emotional and said that she would be praying for whoever the new Pope was, because it was kind of overwhelming to think about taking on this job, especially at a time when people feel there is so much unsettled in the world. To be a leader, to be a voice. What is facing the new Pope? And talk about just the enormity of the emotion that he must be feeling right now.
Trust me, he's in prayer. So I think the fact that we call that room the room of tears, it's tears not so much of joy, but I think of just feeling the burden of the office. And, you know, speaking of the Pope's clothing, we talked about the small, medium, large cassock. Remember 12 years ago when Francis came out without the shoulder cape and the decorative stole the Pope usually wears? It was the first signal of this kind of, you know, new simplicity and humility. It'll be interesting to see what the new Pope comes out in the balcony wearing. You know, he's facing enormous challenges. I think maybe the main one is evangelization. That's especially in the Western countries, the disaffiliation of so many from the church, especially the young, and to try to find a way to present the gospel in a compelling manner. I think that's the greatest challenge the Pope is facing. But also, I'll pick up a point that Claudio made, which is very important. You know, we talk about factions and divisions within the College of Cardinals and different points of view. But when this man, whoever he is, comes out in that balcony, he's the Pope of the whole church. He's the successor of Peter. He's the vicar of Christ. And no matter who he is, no matter what your perspective is, he's the Pope. And we find in this figure our unity. He's a sign and symbol of our unity. And that's the beauty, what you see behind me in the square, is now as all of Rome is you know, coming into this piazza. That's the beauty of the church.
And we are told, Claudio, and I don't know if you can see any of this. I'm not sure exactly where you are. I know you're on the edge of the square there, but one of our producers is reporting, and I've seen this in the conclave that I've been to, because we don't know when the new Pope will come out on the balcony, and everybody in the world will learn at the same time who it is. People are literally running to the square. Are you seeing that?
Yeah. Yes, I can see it. There is a road that you know very well. It's called Via della Conciliazione. It's the main road that leads from St. Peter's Square into the center of Rome. And that's where I can see right now a lot of people dashing for it, making a dash for it. They're running because the bells of St. Peter's Square have rung, and the bells of all the churches of Rome will have rung at the same time. So if nobody has heard this from the news or from social media, they will have understood that from the bells ringing all over the city. And the tradition here is that everybody leaves whatever they are doing at that moment. They even leave their offices and they run to the Vatican because they know they have about an hour to be here, to be present when the Pope appears for the first time and when the world learns who that is. So yes, I'm definitely seeing a lot of people making a dash, but that it's already packed. I mean, I don't know where they're gonna go because St. Peter's Square is packed, Via della Conciliazione is completely packed, so they're probably gonna see it from a distance, whoever is not here yet, Chris.
Father John Bartunek, we have seen this before. We have seen the moment it's announced that the white smoke has happened when we hear the bells tolling now, something that they changed in 2005, that people start descending and they will stand there shoulder to shoulder, strangers from all over the globe, striking up conversations, speculating maybe, saying prayers maybe. We heard one of the young men saying, as the wait went on, more and more people were in prayer, saying the rosary. Tell us what this scene represents.
Oh, I think it represents so many different things. I actually remember the last two elections of Pope. I was in Rome, and I remember at one point I was still a seminarian for Pope Benedict, and I remember the whole seminary emptying out. We got into buses, we rushed down, just as Claudia was describing, wanting to be there, and everyone coming in. And let's not forget, the Pope is also the Bishop of Rome. So all the Romans there who are Catholics, people of faith, even if they're not practicing their faith, they also want to be there. So it's not just the visitors, it's not just the ecclesiastics, it's everyone. And what does it represent? You know, it represents so many things. First of all, it represents fulfillment of hope. And hope is the theme of this year's Jubilee year. But if you think about it, this is the 267th, I think, Pope. And the fact that God has sustained the church and is guaranteed to the faithful, we believe that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And the papacy is a symbol of that fulfillment of God's promise. He works through the successor of St. Peter to continue to shepherd his flock. And so they're gathering not just to do a selfie in St. Peter's when the new Pope comes out, but also they're brought together by this common belief, this faith, this hope that Jesus is still guiding his church. And the papacy itself and then the new Pope are symbols of that, real symbols, a real person, a new Pope. And so it's that hope, that manifestation of hope, and also faith, kind of which links together with hope. The future, God is still with us. God will continue to guide the church. God will continue to inspire us to spread the good news to the world. So some of the deepest ideals of believers are bringing them together right now. And I love what you said earlier about as the crowds kind of fill this space and people kind of get very close to each other as we await the coming of the Pope, and they're talking. It doesn't matter in a sense if they've ever seen each other before. They know they have that faith and that hope that they share, and this is a time to live it, to express it, to manifest it in this, in this very concrete and very real, very human way. Look at all the different types of people we can see on the screen right there. So all that is going on, and I think a lot more even.
So, Father, they voted last night. That was the first half day, shall we say, of the voting in the Sistine Chapel. We saw the black smoke this morning and then the white smoke this afternoon. 2 days has been the average the last two times. This is pretty fast. Do you read anything into it? Do you read anyone into it?
Well, I don't read anyone into it. I won't go that far. But I think maybe, in my own reflections, I could read something into it. We talked a lot before about how these cardinals didn't know each other because there were so many of them from such different parts of the world. They hadn't had a lot of consistories, time together. Well, maybe they got to know each other more quickly than we realized. During the last 10 days, 11 days, also more than half of them had been together in the last two synods in Rome. The last two, they spent a lot of time together, working together. But also, I wonder if, because of how easy it is for people to stay up to date on what's happening in the church, on what's happening in what the Pope is doing these last years throughout the whole papacy of Pope Francis. It's just the digital media, the work that you do, the work that so many great reporters do. It's easy for us to follow. And I think, the cardinals themselves also were following. So maybe they hadn't worked together closely in a lot of cases, but they were following what was going on, how Pope Francis was impacting the church and the world, what the church needs, what the world needs. So I think maybe they didn't need a lot of time to discuss what are the most urgent needs, what are the greatest opportunities for the church in this moment of history. So that might have contributed to making it a little faster than I think anyone thought.
There was some concern, as you know, Father, that if this went on for a while, it would signal divisions in the church. It would say that the cardinals were split on what the church needs in this moment. Does this signal to you that maybe there was more unanimity of opinion about what the church needs than we might have imagined?
Yeah, I think it's fair to infer that. I think it's fair to infer that the thrust of mission, the church's mission to bring the good news to the world in this new period, this new epoch of history, that's the highest priority. And I think all the different cardinals share that. Even the glimpses that we got of their congregations when they were having the different congregations, that's what they called it last week, the glimpses that we got in the media of the topics, yeah, there were topics on which there are a lot of difference of opinions. What's the best way to deal with problems like immigration? What's the best way to deal with interreligious dialogue? But those are all kind of choosing different means to achieve the goal. And it seems like maybe we can infer that the goal of just spreading the good news, the mission of the church, bringing people the good news of God's grace and his salvation, that was the highest priority. And they're okay, the cardinals are okay with maybe having different opinions about what's the best way to do that. And they just wanted someone who's going to keep that focus kind of central.
I want to bring in MSNBC papal analyst Kathleen Sprouse-Cumming, also a professor of American Studies at the University of Notre Dame. We see the band, we see those distinctive uniforms of the Swiss Guard, the Vatican Guard. And we should also mention that this is auspicious in many ways. Kathleen, this is also a Jubilee year for the Catholic Church.
That's right. Like Father John said, it's a Jubilee of hope. And this is the first time in over 300 years there's been a conclave during a Jubilee year. And I think of Pope Francis's words on Easter Sunday in his final Easter blessing, where he addressed pilgrims of hope in his final message. And of course, many of the people in the square right now came to Rome specifically for the Jubilee. And this is truly a hopeful moment for the church. The fact that the cardinals reached consensus a bit quicker than many people thought they would, given the complexities, is really a reason for hope. And certainly you can sense the hope in the crowd right now as we await the announcement of the new Pope.
Are you surprised by how quickly it happened? Because there had been so much talk about the fact this is the largest number of voting cardinals in the conclave. This is the most diverse, the 133 of them from 70 different countries. Many of them had never been in, I think a majority of them had never experienced a conclave before. Are you surprised?
I am a little surprised. That's right. 80% of them were voting in a conclave for the first time. You had to get to the magic number of 89, and many believe that that was going to take a long time. I'm a little surprised at the timing. It seems a little off in the sense that the fourth ballot would have been expected to be at about 5:30, whereas the fifth ballot would have been about 7. So the announcement at 6 indicates either a fourth ballot that was a bit on the later side, or a fifth ballot a bit on the early side. We're not quite sure what that means, and if we will even ever find out what that means. But it is interesting to me, and wonder if it signals something really interesting that's about to happen. But yes, I think that the cardinals have built consensus so quickly, restores really the faith in the process. I know it's a process that seems arcane and very detailed, but it seems to have worked.
Well, Deborah Lubov, one thing we can say is, even though conventional wisdom would hold that one of the front runners, if we can call them that, but the people who were most talked about, the key people who were garnering headlines, the people who frankly were probably best known to the largest number of cardinals, may indeed indicate that it's one of them, but we have certainly, Deborah, been surprised before. Is Deborah there? We seem to have some audio problems.
Yes. So,
there she is.
We were certainly surprised, even with Francis, because we thought that his opportunity, in a way, had passed. But ultimately, if they feel that that person is the right person for the job, then nothing will surprise us. With Benedict, he had a lot of moments prior to John Paul II's passing, which really sort of brought attention to him. Also, when he spoke about the filth in the church during the Via Crucis meditation, and when he had presided over the funeral of Don Giussani of the Communion and Liberation Movement. So there were moments that brought attention to him, but it's something that right now we will see. We'll see.
So tell us what we will see when the first person who comes out on that balcony, right, Deborah, is not the new pope.
Right, it's the Cardinal proto-deacon. So presuming that he's not the elected pope, he would be the person who comes out. His name is Cardinal Dominique Mamberti, and he would be the one to make that famous announcement with some assistance, Habemus Papam, and he would say in Latin the whole formula, naming who the new pope is before the future pope, the now pope, but we just don't know who it is, actually exits and comes out to the balcony to give his blessing and greet the faithful.
And let me go back to you, if I can, Claudio, because when he comes out, the announcement will be made in Latin. And if past tells us anything, they can fix the smoke and make it wider. They can start ringing the bells. But sometimes in the cheering of the crowd and the excitement, it's hard to hear, especially where you are, what the name is that they're announcing, right?
Absolutely, it has happened. Yeah, it has happened before, and also because they name him in Latin, so we really, struggle to find out who that person is, unless it's someone that is very clear. We've heard when Pope Francis came out, it was Jorge Bergoglio, but they named that in Latin, and we were trying to, get people to tell us what it was, because we quite didn't get it, because they were so loud not only they said that in Latin, it was so loud in the crowd. There were tens of thousands of people cheering and screaming that it was quite difficult at the beginning. And then, of course, we kind of recognized him when he came out from his face. So I guess the same thing is going to happen now. We have, of course, a pool of 133 potential popes here. That's the number of cardinal electors who were inside the Sistine Chapel. So hopefully it will be clear enough for us to know who it is in the first 5 minutes. Chris.
Yeah, Father, I mean, one of the things we try to make comparisons for folks about elections. There is no election like this. And it is legitimate to say, while there are people who are better known than others, you have not a Republican and a Democrat. You have 133 people who went into that room, and genuinely, any of them could emerge as Pope. Maybe some are more likely than others, but we just don't know, Father. This truly is unique in the world, unique in its history, yes, in its longevity dating back to the Middle Ages, but it's something that has sustained and been preserved even in this media age where everything leaks. We are looking at a balcony and we have no clue.
Yeah, it's true. The only thing we know is that he comes from if he's one of the cardinals, right? If he's one of the cardinals who was in the conclave, which is most likely, but it's possible they can elect someone who wasn't a cardinal in the conclave. That's also theoretically a possibility. But if it's one of the cardinals, yeah, all we know is, well, he's one of 70 possible different countries, because there are 70 countries represented by the 133 cardinals from any possible continent, from any possible background. We have cardinals who've been involved in papal or Vatican diplomacy their entire lives as priests, as bishops. We have others who've done a wide variety of different types of missions in different continents, in different countries. We have cardinals who have a lot of experience as scholars, as intellectuals. We have a lot of just such a variety. So you're absolutely right. We have no idea. And I think that's also tied into, when we see the faces of the people who are gathered there in the square, the faithful who come together, there's so much joy, there's so much anticipation, there's so much hope. And that's part of it as well. Like, God's providence is kind of an ideal that we have as Catholic believers, that God's providence is real. And although he allows for human freedom, the cardinals truly did elect. It wasn't dictated by some vision from the Holy Spirit, probably. So, but at the same time, there's a trust that all those possibilities, God's providence is at work within them. By the way, what we're seeing on the screen, we have two different bands, kind of military bands gathering. We have the Vatican Swiss Guards and their band, and we have some of the Italian Carabinieri and their band. These two bands actually come together a couple times a year, on Easter and Christmas, and they play when the Pope makes a blessing on the city and the world on those holy days. Both bands play their anthems to show their solidarity together, and so they're kind of gathering for the emergence of the new Pope. Like, both of these different bodies, the Vatican and then Rome and Italy, welcoming the new Pope, because that's where he's going to be living. So it's interesting to see them gathering. I don't know if they were all uniformed up right before or if they had to rush and get their uniforms on, but it's interesting to see that as well.
Well, we are more than 30 minutes from that white smoke appearing, and again, the new Pope will be led through the Hall of Benedictions atop the narthex of St. Peter's to the window that opens out to the loggia. And as we were speaking about, the senior cardinal deacon announces the new Pope in the traditional Latin. Now, it's taken as little with John Paul II as 15 minutes for the announcement of the name, so we're well past that. But 54 minutes for Benedict, an hour and 6 minutes for Francis. And as we wait, I'm going to go to NBC's Molly Hunter. There's nobody that's leaving that square right now, that's for sure.
Chris, the crowds are streaming in as soon as those bells rang. People started to come in from all directions. And actually, one of the people who ran from his home, I understand, is Father Michael Baggett. You live here in Rome. You work here in Rome. What went through your head when you heard those bells?
I was so excited. I had a long day working at the university. I teach theology at Regina Apostolorum, the Angelicum, Catholic Tech. But the moment I got the notification on my phone, I made sure to run over and spend some time with about 100,000 or so of my best friends from around the world. And we're done watching the chimney. I can't think of any other institution that can gather people around the world to watch a chimney and a seagull. But we have something much more exciting happening now, a new shepherd for our church.
What does this feel like? Can you just, I mean, we're looking around, we see different flags. We hear so many different languages. We were going through the crowd looking for someone who spoke English, and actually it was much harder. It is such a diverse group of people here. Can you talk to me about that?
I love the amazing unity within diversity that is part of our Catholic family, that we can truly bring people together in a world that's divided, in a world that's angry and polarized. This is a point of unity. This is a point of love, and I'm sure there were some heated debates leading up to this moment, but now is the time to get behind our shepherd and to continue this work of self-sacrificial love and this work of bringing unity, peace, and harmony with all of our diversity. There's room for all the languages, all the cultures, all the celebrations, all the chants in this unity. It's incredible.
There are loads of tourists here. There are loads of people who are just curious. There are loads of secular press as well, of course, as the Catholic press. And what struck me is just what an unbelievable moment where nobody knows anything additional. I didn't have any sources. We don't have any exit polls that are telling us.
I don't either.
Everyone is waiting and staring at that chimney. And that was a real unifying kind of galvanizing, energizing moment.
Right. There's such excitement, but it's not nervousness. It's not mere anxiety. It's this anticipation of a gift. That there's a sense, I think, of many in the crowd of trust. We don't know exactly who's going to come out. We don't know exactly his language, his culture, his background, but we're ready to get behind him, and we're ready to continue this mission to unite and to love and serve.
Father Michael Baggett, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Chris, it is an unbelievable atmosphere down here. We will do our best to go find some other, there's so many people here, to go find some other people to share their viewpoints with you. But everyone is telling us that it is hopeful and that it is unifying regardless of religion, regardless of geography, regardless of language. It's a pretty extraordinary to be down here, Chris.
Well, if you have any more people who would like to talk to us, we would love to hear from them. But in the meantime, Molly, our producer, Alex, who is down there, was in the crowd and heard shouting of, they did it, obviously, referencing the Cardinals who have elected the new Pope, followed by rapturous applause, yelling, and plenty of tears in St. Peter's Square at the sign of white smoke. Rosalia Cordeiro, 42 years old from Brazil, was weeping while embracing a group of friends. I'm so happy, she said. It's so incredible to be here at this moment. I don't know how to express myself, but I am grateful to God for this moment. Deborah, let's talk a little more about exactly what is going to happen, because I want to prepare folks. We're going to stay quiet once we see the senior Cardinal Deacon, as you mentioned, Cardinal Mamberti, come out. He'll be the first person. When you see those doors open, experience will tell us that the crowd will erupt. He will announce the new Pope on a balcony saying Habemus Papam, the name, the given name, the birth name of the Pope, the name of the Cardinal, essentially, and then the name he has chosen for Pope. What are you expecting when those doors open, Deborah?
Well, it's just going to be an incredible, incredible moment. I think everyone has chills, and we see that through the excitement in the square. And we'll see also what the future Pope decides to name himself. Pope Francis had speculated that the next Pope would be John the 24th, so we'll see whether or not he's proven right or wrong about that. But certainly there's a lot of ceremony that takes place. There was the anthems, including the Vatican anthem we just heard behind us. And then it's kind of up to that Pope to determine a bit how he handles that moment. So Francis, in his sort of simple style, asked for the people to pray for him and came out in a more simple approach. And John Paul II had said, if I make a mistake, you'll correct me. And so it really will kind of give us a little bit of insight into the identity of our new Pope.
It is true that the name that they choose can tell us something about this new Pope. For example, if you pick John Paul III, named after what was Pope John Paul II, now St. John Paul, would signal the new Pope will continue the policies of the former Karol Wojtyła. Discipline inside the church, lots of evangelization, social justice. He was a big fighter for social justice. Should it be Pius XIII, then they would intend to move to the right of John Paul. Continuity, essentially, with the pontificates of more traditional popes of the past. And if it were to be Francis II, there is no doubt that the new Pope would follow in Francis's model. I want to bring in Timothy Kasicki. He is president of the Jesuit Conference, and of course, the Pope was the first Jesuit Pope. Your reaction to what we're seeing and how you're feeling right now?
Well, Chris, I'm remembering 12 years ago at this time, and I was at the Jesuit provincial office in Chicago where I was serving as provincial. And not unlike now, I was getting many texts from friends. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And I remember texting some of my friends and says, well, I can assure you it won't be a Jesuit, because Bergoglio was the only one there. And so when the name came out, it just taught us that fundamental lesson that no one really knows whose name is going to be announced. And I think the combination of who's going to be chosen, what name he's going to take, and the fact that this doesn't happen very often. You know, I mean, St. Peter's Basilica is a Renaissance building. So, you know, you realize there's only so many conclaves where a pope has come out on that loggia. So how many times in one's life do we see this? So this is a very historic moment. I know a lot of young Jesuits with whom I live, for whom this is their first real experience of a conclave and seeing a pope come out and be announced. So I think we're holding in tension the anxiety of who is it going to be, and also I think the real prophetic beauty of this moment for the world.
You know, there is something about following a pope that is as popular as Pope Francis was. We saw when John Paul, who was arguably the most popular pope of modern times, First of all, the outpouring when he died, but the difficulty, frankly, that Pope Benedict, or I think any pope may have had, to follow in those footsteps. He was unique and extraordinary. Pope Francis, who connected in so many ways with so many people around the globe, again, starting with when he first stepped out onto that loggia. He had on the plain white cassock, not the more formal garments of popes past. He didn't have a gold cross. He had a simple iron cross. And again, he made it clear by asking for prayers, as he did often throughout his papacy, the humility he felt at being given this overwhelming, I think, job. So will you read anything into what you see? And do you think whoever the new pope is has some pretty big shoes to fill, at least in the minds of much of the faithful?
I think all popes have big shoes to fill, and I think every pope has come out and first acknowledged his predecessor with great love and care. The last conclave was unique because Pope Benedict was still alive. He was an emeritus pope, but whether the pope has died or is alive, they acknowledge that, and it's almost an acknowledgement of the shoes they have to fill. Of course, we are going to look at everything. We're going to look at how the new pope is robed, and I think there's going to be a tendency to read into that, but some of that is just tradition, and how a pope connects with tradition and continuity is something we want to have our minds open to. I agree with what has already been said, that the name the Pope chooses is very significant, and we'll see. But that name could be either connected to a past Pope or to a saint for whom they choose the name. We know that Francis chose a very beloved saint whom no Pope had ever chosen before. We might have a new Pope's name that we've never heard. So I think we're open to all of that. And then we're going to hear the Pope speak, and we're going to see his demeanor and his interaction with hundreds of thousands of people, not just in the square, but lined in the streets of Rome. And I think that's going to give us a feeling of hope and excitement for what awaits us.
I also want to bring in MSNBC contributor Christopher White, Vatican correspondent at the National Catholic Reporter. The shot we have up right now, Chris, the Vatican TV has moved away from it, but we saw flags from so many different countries. And you know, from walking through the crowds, and you hear all of the different languages, some of those people made a specific choice. They heard when the conclave was going to happen. They got on a plane, they got in their cars, they maybe just had to get on a bus in Rome, but they wanted to be there when the Pope came out. What are you experiencing yourself as someone who has lived in Rome for many years, and what are you feeling from that crowd?
Chris, I think there's an extraordinary sense of history being made right now in front of our eyes, and great expectation for that. I mean, you look out at the crowds below me, and you hear and you feel the energy just bubbling up. You know, it reminds me of traveling the world with Pope Francis and, you know, being in audiences of 1 million, 2 million, sometimes 3 million people with him. And you really do get all of humanity on display. There are people in this crowd that are fervently praying. There are people that, you know, are acting like it's a party, already shouting, "Viva il Papa, long live the Pope." It's this sense that all of humanity is out here waiting for this moment, and they're sharing in this together. And I think it does speak to the power of the office, of the papacy, to unite so many strands of so many different individuals from so many walks of life. And this also attests to the great responsibility that this new pope will have to sort of unify them all together, despite this being a very diverse Catholic Church of 1.4 billion people.
Do you ascribe, Chris, to the belief that if it's a fairly quick conclave, as this was, it means that it may be one of the more familiar names that we've been talking about, less likely to be a surprise?
I think so. I mean, had this conclave gone on another day or so, I think the general thinking would have been they've had to search for a compromise candidate. The fact that we're on the second day, perhaps the fifth ballot, means it's more likely one of the big names that had already been discussed about in the days leading up to this election. You know, let me just offer a very important caveat. In 2013, Cardinal Bergoglio, who became Pope Francis, was elected on the second day in the 5th ballot. And he was not on most people's list, at least certainly not at the top. So I'm sort of bracing myself for whoever comes out there. And it's a bit of a mystery, I think. No wise person is putting money on this at this stage.
We were talking about this earlier, Claudio and I, Deborah and I, we were talking about the fact that when they come out, because the crowd is so loud, unless you have someone who is very familiar to everyone. Remember, it's 133 different possibilities. Not everybody may be known by sight to everybody in the crowd. It can be hard to hear or hard to understand what exactly is being said. And you're not actually at that moment seeing the new Pope.
Yeah, I've got my little list of Latin names, but that won't matter if I can't hear anything. I think we're all just sort of going to be having to wait a pause or two to see the face, and then once we see a face, we'll have real ID. But the other comforting thing is this happens pretty quickly. So as soon as this kicks into motion in a few minutes, we hope we'll be able to identify who this person is and get a sense of what the room was thinking. I mean, this is 133 men from all over the globe, 80% of whom had never done this before, and they reached a decision in 2 days. That says something about the ability to achieve consensus at a time in the world in which consensus is very hard to come by, it seems.
You know, to the outside world, the conclave is over. I mean, I think one of the last things that happens is that the final vote tally essentially is made. And by the way, after every cardinal writes down how many votes for how many people as the voting goes on, those are collected too. So it's not like they put them in their pocket and they can later write about them or show them to people. But when the Pope comes out, he spoke to the people who were assembled, the College of Cardinals. He could keep them there, right? He could say, you know what, by the time this is all over, it's going to be 7:30. Let's all go back to Santa Marta and have dinner together. The conclave isn't over yet.
It's certainly what Pope Francis did in 2013. They all had dinner together. It was a celebration. I think it was a chance for them to kind of relax, to sort of put aside all of the conversations about who comes next, and just to enjoy each other's company and to continue to get to know each other. These men may have done their most important job, which is to elect a new Pope. But one of the chief jobs of a cardinal is to advise the Pope on matters of church governance and to sort of be a part of a sign of unity of the church. And I think it would be, probably likely that a new Pope would want to continue to provide some sort of way of fellowship and deepening those bonds. But we'll have to see. I mean, it's up to each Pope to sort of set a direction, and they all bring their own personalities to this. It's a pretty heady thing to think about how just, 48 hours ago, these individuals had all the freedom in the world. They may have had their own social media accounts. They could go out to dinner with their friends. They could easily text. And those freedoms are going to get dramatically restrained forever, going forward. And that's a huge responsibility to take on.
Christopher White, thank you so much. And what he just said, Claudio, brings me to you because you have covered these last 3 conclaves now, and you have watched popes, you have traveled with popes. There are popes who took before they became pope, took public transportation, who again walked the streets, who went to the Borgo Pio nearby where there are lots of great restaurants and would enjoy a meal basically unnoticed, who rode Vespas to and from wherever they are going. How much is this individual's life going to change?
Well, you see, Pope Francis in that way has actually set a standard. This is whilst he was a cardinal, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was known to just take the tram, take the bus, be among the people, and he kept his style when he came to the Vatican. If it was for him, he probably would have still gotten the bus, but of course he couldn't get out of the Vatican walls. But at the same time, he just lowered those standards within the Catholic Church, within the cardinals of that time by wearing wearing that, not a golden cross, but just an iron cross, by wearing simple black shoes, by paying his own bill, by staying in a room in a Vatican guest house instead of sleeping in the luxurious papal and huge apartments. So I think that that lesson cannot be forgotten, and I think that the next Pope will still need to maintain that humility. We know that among the cardinals who were in the Sistine Chapel and among the papabili, the candidates, there were also people like that. Very simple. I'll just give you an example. I don't know, of course, who's going to come out of that balcony, but for instance, Cardinal Zuppi is an Italian cardinal who's known to love to ride a bicycle, and he was seen also here with his bicycle. And like him, there are others who have maintained that humility. So perhaps we will see who comes out of that balcony, and we will see whether the cardinals took that into consideration when they chose him. In the meantime, I just want to show you what's happening here. I'll just ask the cameraman, Tony Hemmings, to zoom in into the crowd, because what's fascinating here is that everybody's taking selfies, including nuns. I saw nuns taking selfies, and I don't think, if there is one symbol of a 21st century conclave, that is it. And I love that moment. And right now, I don't know whether you can see it, everybody's completely packed. You can't drop a needle here. This is the area just outside of St. Peter's Square. And as I was mentioning, this crowd goes all the way back into Via della Conciliazione, this long road that leads to Rome, and more people are coming. They are coming because they don't want to miss the moment when the Pope appears on that. Well, when the name is being announced on the balcony, and then the Pope appears right after that. And compare it to 2013. I was here, of course. We're here that day when Pope Francis appeared on the balcony. Well, this is a much more beautiful day in terms of it's sunny, it's warm, it's a fantastic day compared to that day back then in 2013 when it was raining and cold, and still there were hundreds of thousands of people with all those umbrellas open to cover themselves from the rain. They didn't care, they just wanted to be here to welcome the new Pope. Well, today is an absolutely perfect, beautiful, sunny day, and these people can't wait to see who's going to appear on that balcony right behind me, Chris.
Sometimes it is better to be lucky than anything else. Timing is everything, which leads me to MSNBC producer Chris Nicoletti, who's joining us on the phone from St. Peter's Square. Chris, you and I talked about the fact that you were going to Italy. Little could we have said with any certainty that you would be on the square waiting for the new Pope to come out onto the loggia. What's it like, and what are you feeling? We lost reception, which is, hopefully we'll get him back, because I can tell you how excited he was, first of all, to go there. And we joked about the fact, what if he went, and because we obviously knew that the Pope had been sick. Let me tell you something that our team on the square heard from Caroline Cooper. She's 70 years old. She came from London with a friend, as we hear from more and more people specifically for the conclave. She said, we arrived on Monday, and both yesterday and today we've been here in the square all day waiting for smoke signals. We just couldn't resist coming. Today we were part of history. I'm really, really emotional, she says, holding back tears. And then her friend handed her a tissue so she could dry her eyes. We hope, she said, that the next Pope will be as kind and generous as Francis was. Father Kasicki, what do you hope for the new Pope?
I hope for the new Pope that he feels the support of the cardinals and the Catholic Church. Before they go into the Sistine Chapel, they're in the Pauline Chapel, and there's some beautiful paintings in there. But one of them is of St. Peter being crucified upside down. And I imagine that all of them look at that, and if any have aspirations to be Pope, they're going to look at the fate of St. Peter, and they're going to realize that this is both a blessing and a cross, that they're carrying the weight of the church, the weight of the people of God. And so the first thing I want that new Pope to feel is the love and support, because we know how heavy that burden is. We certainly want a Pope who carries the burden of the people. You know, I think the Catholic faithful fell in love with a Pope who said he wanted priests like me to take on the smell of the sheep. And so we want a Pope who helps send all of us who work and minister in the church to be close to the people, to go to all corners of the earth as Pope Francis did. The other beauty of the church is the tradition. It's 2,000 years old. And so the Pope always holds up the rich tradition, the teachings of the church with the needs of the people. So a Pope who can represent what is the 2,000-year deposit of faith with the...
Bring in Elizabeth Lev, Vatican author, historian, and guide, who is at the Vatican right now. Liz, we are staring at those curtains, seeing if there's any movement at all, either in the curtains or the door. But I want to pick up on where Father left off, because the new Pope is led through the Hall of Benedictions to the window that opens out onto the loggia. Talk about that walk, what he will see, and what we know about that experience.
Well, he exits from the Sistine Chapel into a room that's called the Sala Reggia, and it's filled with images of diplomacy, images of a reminder of the world that he's going to have to confer with. He's going to have to interact with heads of state, and the painting is all very famous interactions with heads of state, in which usually the Vatican came out the better. But then he passes by that Pauline chapel that you just heard about. And I think one of the most important things about Michelangelo's image of the crucifixion of St. Peter is that that image is designed so as the Pope walks by it, Peter is looking right at him. And that's a reminder that the very first Pope, the person who, the next man to walk out on that balcony, the job description is that, to sacrifice himself. And as he stands out there, he will make his way down a long hallway, and he'll turn out into the balcony that's now rimmed with red. And you'll see him, this new man. He will no longer be these names that we've been hearing all week, Tagle, Pizzaballa, whatever it may be. He will be a new man, and he will be taking on a new task. And right in front of him, directly in front of him, is that obelisk that the cameras and the drones have been showing, that marker that shows where the first Pope, the first St. Peter, was crucified upside down in witness to the faith. And for all the other things, the travel, the languages, the generosity, the real job of this Pope will be a compelling witness to the faith.
Does he walk out of there knowing that there was a pretty quick unanimity of opinion, that within 4 or 5 sets of ballots, they came together at a time when a lot of predictions were, because of the diversity and the newness of this College of Cardinals, it might have taken a lot longer. Does that give not just a boost to whoever is the new Pope, but does it send a signal to the crowd and the Catholic Church worldwide?
I think that's going to be I think it's a very important sense of support. I mean, it's a show of a sense of these cardinals who will stand behind him. As a matter of fact, the first sign that something is happening is when the side balcony doors open, and this flood of red will come out onto the balconies as his brother cardinals will be standing around him. And then he will step out surrounded by these men that have chosen him, that have clearly supported him after a brief series of deliberations. I mean, it's an awesome responsibility, but it's a very auspicious start.
In terms of the auspicious start, let's talk about the reality that this Pope will wake up to tomorrow. And I don't want to, you know, in any way take away from the joy that we are seeing in that crowd, and it is joyful. But what do you do as Pope when you wake up the next morning? Presumably, he may go back to Casa Santa Marta and have dinner with the cardinal electors. I think what Pope Francis said was, and to laughter, God forgive you for what you have done, when they had dinner after he was elected. They all had a good laugh about that. But what are the next hours and the next day going to be like for this Pope, Liz?
Well, I have a feeling someone's going to show up with a whole lot of papers and a whole lot of things and a whole lot of assignments and a to-do list that would make most of us quake in our boots. I think he's going to have to get ready, these little jobs of getting ready leave his old life. And he must have come to Casa Santa Marta knowing that he perfectly well could have gone home to return to be the archbishop of a diocese or the head of a dicastery. So there's going to be these first few days of preparing himself for the next step. But he will, I suspect, show himself to his diocese almost immediately. Because yes, there is the whole world out here today, but we just elected the Bishop of Rome. And the Romans are waiting, and the Romans are excited, and the Romans will be waiting to see him.
I think we should mention we are now 1 hour and 1 minute from the time when we first saw white smoke. That is not unusual. For Pope Benedict, it took 59 minutes, but for John Paul II, it took 1 hour and 10 minutes before we saw him. And for Francis in 2013, it was 1 hour and 6 minutes before the announcement of the name, and then another 10 minutes before he actually came out and addressed the crowd. Let me bring in NBC's Molly Hunter, who is still in St. Peter's Square for us. I can't imagine that people are not just about ready to explode with excitement, waiting for that door to open.
Chris, it's pretty hard to hear you, but we are, where everyone is now kind of trained their eyes, of course, from the screens, which are showing really excited fans waving their flags, cheering up to that balcony. People are now starting to glance their eyes up to that balcony. But I do just want to bring in Mary Fiorentini. Is that
Fiorito?
Fiorito.
Yes.
You've worked for the Catholic Church for years. You host a podcast. You happen to be here. You were sent here this week.
Yes.
Can you tell me what it was like to be here this afternoon?
Oh my goodness. You know, we weren't anticipating that the new Holy Father would be elected until probably tomorrow, and so we were sitting at dinner and I looked down at my phone and there was a message saying there's white smoke, and we just got up and ran out of the restaurant, and then as we were running down the street, all of a sudden there were dozens and dozens of people running with us, all saying Bianca Fume, and it just, I mean, my heart is
White
like
smoke,
racing.
white smoke.
Right, exactly. So so we have a new Holy Father, and now we're waiting to see who it is.
Can you give me a sense? I'm not Catholic,
Yes.
but being in this square all day, we were here last night, we were here today, has this unbelievable sense of unity that I've been trying to find the words to describe.
Yes.
Can you help me kind of describe this communal atmosphere?
Yeah, you know, it's the Holy Father is a person I think people of all faiths look to as someone who's very close to Jesus Christ and someone who's sort of a moral compass for us, you know. And so it's a very disorienting time when there's no Pope, right? And, you know, at Catholics, we call the Pope the Holy Father, so he's sort of like a family figure to us. So when the Pope dies, it's tremendous sadness, but when we're waiting to elect a new Pope, because God always provides for his church, it's like awaiting the birth of a new family member. So there's excitement, and we know there's going to be great joy. God never leaves us abandoned. He always leaves us with a shepherd to help his sheep, and so now we get to meet the person that he's chosen for us.
Did you arrive so you missed the white smoke, you got here
Yes.
when the bells were ringing,
Yes.
and people were just streaming in, and now we're looking up at that balcony. Everyone's eyes have kind of gone up to see.
Yes.
You're obviously going to stay here.
Oh, I'm not moving. Oh, I'm not moving until we find out who it is. And what was very moving for me, where I got tears in my eyes, the Swiss Guard who protect the Holy Father, they have been silent and not really present because there's been no Holy Father to guard. And you saw them all marching in formation, and now you can, if
They marched right
the
by us
camera,
right here.
they marched
Yeah.
right past us, and now they're on either side of that balcony, ready to protect the new Holy Father when he comes. So
you're getting.
it's you know, it's very emotional, you know, because this is a person that, again, you know, we're going to look to as sort of a moral guide and someone who will help us be closer to God and by praying for us. You know, you feel safer in the world when you know that the Pope is there praying for you. Do you remember when the pandemic started and Pope Francis stood out here by himself and prayed for the world? There's something about having that figure present that makes you feel safer, you know, that you know the Lord is going to take care of you.
So, on a personal level, you haven't been to a conclave before
I
because
haven't.
you've been busy working, you
Right.
were saying.
Right. I sent 2 cardinals to a conclave, but you know, there's always things to do in your home diocese where you live, right? The churches all ring their bells at the same time, and you know, you have to make sure there's black bunting on the church when the Holy Father dies. So to be able to be here in person and get to see this now firsthand, I feel like, you know, this is one thing off my Catholic bucket list. So, here we movement. It's the moment.
It looked like the curtains were parting.
The curtains are parting. Stay with us, if you will.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus Papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
The announcement has been made, and it is an astonishing selection. An American, the first American, Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, 69 years old, born in Chicago, Illinois, created a cardinal just 2 years ago by Pope Francis, is the new pope. Robert Francis Prevost, and you see members of the college coming out. This was not high on anyone's list. He was mentioned if there was to be an American, and then dismissed because he was an American. He is reportedly very close to Pope Francis's vision on the environment, his outreach to the poor and migrants, meeting people where they are. Just last year, he said something that sounds an awful lot like something Pope Francis would have said. He said, the bishop is not supposed to be a little prince sitting in his kingdom. Importantly, he spoke supportively of Pope Francis's change in pastoral practice to allow divorced and civilly remarried Catholics to receive Holy Communion. He did not seem as close to the LGBTQ community as Francis, but he did show at least some support for the idea that gay couples could be blessed. He speaks English, Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese. He can read Latin and German. That is significant because an increasingly global church, where it is growing in the far reaches, in Asia, in Africa, 2 places where if it wasn't going to be an Italian, they thought the new pope would come from. He can very easily slide into many of those places. He has obviously great linguistic skills. He's an insider as well, and there were a lot of people who said if it wasn't going to be Paroline, who for the longest time had been considered the front runner, he was an insider, a curial insider, which means he was someone who understands the inner workings of the Vatican. The Vatican has a lot of challenges right now, not the least of which is an ongoing financial problem. And I should also say that he is American by birth, but he's only spent about a third of his life in the United States. He has spent an awful lot of time in Europe and Latin America, again, to the point of looking for a pope who has a global vision and global experience. Cardinal Prevost is that person. We're still waiting to hear what his elected name may be. That will give us some other indications. But he was interested himself in selecting potential bishops who adopted a pastor's first approach. So in other words, the same thing that we saw from Francis that made him so popular around the world, which is that he wanted people to go into the world as representatives of the church who were not going to say, I am a bishop, I am a cardinal, but I am here to serve you. He is an Augustinian. He joined the Augustinian mission in Peru back in 1985. They lead a kind of semi-monastic life, the Augustinians. They're engaged in a whole bunch of pursuits, notably education and prison work. We have his name. He is going to be Pope Leo XIV. Pope Leo XIV, the first American ever elected Pope. Pope Leo XIV, Elizabeth Lev, as our resident historian, we said the name would tell us a lot. Your reaction to an American and also to his choice of a name.
Well, first of all, this is an amazing bridging of the divide. We have an American who was born in the United States, educated in Chicago, but really spent most of his career in South America, in Peru. So we see this wonderful opportunity to sort of knit these northern and southern hemispheres together. But I find even most fascinating the choice of the name is Leo XIV, because his predecessor will therefore be Leo XIII, who was the first pope of the 20th century. Leo XIII is particularly important because he is the father of what we consider Catholic social justice. And so it really does indicate a pope who is going to continue in these themes of Pope Francis, being very concerned about the poor, the rights of immigrants, migrants. I think we can expect to see, in many ways, much of the Francis pontificate in this new reign of Leo XIV.
Let me go to you, Father Kosicki, because every indication from what we know about the new Pope Leo is that he is much in the realm of Pope Francis and the idea, and we were hearing in the crowd just shouts of Leo, Leo, Leo. The fact that he has chosen as his name the father of Catholic social justice. What does that mean to you as someone, obviously as a Jesuit, who saw the first Jesuit pope elected and now the first American?
Yes, this is a very moving announcement. I must say I'm very touched both by who was elected and the choice of a name. He's a member of the Augustinian order, as you said, so the second pope to come from a religious order. And remember that we haven't had a religious pope before Francis since 1832, Pope Gregory XVI, who was a Camaldolese monk. So this is amazing. Two popes in a row from religious orders. That he is the quintessential missionary priest who has, as you noted, spent his life in Latin America. A very good friend of mine who's a new bishop in the United States recently told me that he met him. There's a training for new bishops, and how impressed he was with the prefect. He was the prefect for the congregation of bishops now before becoming Pope Leo XIV. And when I think of the study of Catholic social teaching and the very first social letter, Rerum Novarum, that Leo XIII wrote that began Catholic social teaching, and that he would choose the name Leo XIV. Many with whom I live with had that as a name that we thought might emerge for the new pope is very moving. I mean, I can't wait to see him come out, to hear his voice. We've never had a pope for whom English is his first language. That's going to be new for us in the United States. But I think he's going to say he's American in the sense of all the Americas, and now he's here to serve the whole world.
Let's talk a little bit more about the new Pope Leo and what we know about him. He's considered a moderate, even though he does ascribe to many of the